Football is the world's biggest sport. Every year, millions of matches are played, millions of goals are scored, millions of tackles are made. Most are forgotten within days. But every once in a while, football gives us a moment so unbelievable, so emotional, so impossible, that the entire world stops. Fans stop cheering. Commentators lose their words. Even rival supporters forget who they're supporting, because for a few unforgettable seconds, football becomes bigger than the game itself. Today, we're counting down 10 football moments that shocked the entire world. Moments that changed careers, changed tournaments, changed football history forever. And trust me, the moment at number 1 still feels impossible today. Let's begin. No football fan expected what happened in Belo Horizonte. Brazil weren't just hosting the World Cup. They were carrying the dreams of an entire nation. Generations had waited for this moment. Playing a World Cup at home was supposed to end decades of waiting. Instead, it became the darkest night in Brazilian football history. Germany scored once, then again. Then again. Before Brazilian supporters could even understand what was happening, the scoreboard read 5-1 in just 29 minutes. The stadium fell silent. Players looked frozen. Fans cried in the stands. Some simply stared at the pitch, unable to believe what they were watching. Brazil didn't just lose. They watched their football identity collapse in front of the entire world. More than a decade later, people still don't call it the semifinal. They simply call it 7-1. And somehow, that wasn't the biggest shock in football history. Some goals are beautiful. Some are important. This one became legendary. It was the UEFA Champions League. Real Madrid. Juventus, one of Europe's toughest stadiums. The cross floated into the penalty area. For a split second, it looked impossible. The angle was wrong. The defenders were in position. The goalkeeper was ready. Then, Cristiano Ronaldo left the ground. His body became almost perfectly horizontal. His right foot connected perfectly. The ball exploded into the top corner. Silence. Then something extraordinary happened. Juventus supporters, the opposing fans, rose to their feet. They applauded. One of football's greatest rival crowds had just applauded the man who scored against them. That almost never happens. Because everyone inside that stadium understood. They hadn't just witnessed a goal. They had witnessed history. But the next moment on our list didn't even require a goal. The biggest match in football. The World Cup final, one of the greatest players ever, his final professional match. Everything was perfectly written. Zinedine Zidane had already scored. France were fighting for another World Cup. Then, football witnessed something nobody expected. Without warning, Zidane turned around, walked toward Marco Materazzi, and drove his head directly into his chest. The stadium froze. Players couldn't understand what had happened. Millions watching around the world were equally stunned. Seconds later, the referee reached for the red card. Just like that, one of football's greatest careers ended with a walk toward the tunnel. To this day, people still ask the same question. What did Materazzi say? Maybe we'll never know, but everyone remembers what happened next. Because one single moment transformed one of football's greatest legends forever. And if you think that was unbelievable, wait until you see what happened at number 7. Football has produced thousands of goals. But only one still divides the world almost 40 years later. It was the 1986 FIFA World Cup. Argentina, England, a rivalry already filled with emotion. Then came one of football's most controversial moments. The ball floated high into the penalty area. England's goalkeeper rushed forward. So did Diego Maradona. Everyone expected the goalkeeper to claim it. Instead, Maradona reached the ball first. Not with his head, not with his foot, but with his hand. The referee didn't see it. The goal stood. England protested. Argentina celebrated. Millions watching around the world couldn't believe what had just happened. Later, Maradona described it with 5 unforgettable words. A little with the head, and a little with the hand of God. Those words became immortal. To Argentina, it became legendary. To England, it became unforgettable, and football has never stopped arguing about it. But while that goal created controversy, the next moment created something far more powerful: hope. Some stories belong in Hollywood. This one happened on a football pitch. At the beginning of the season, Leicester City were expected to fight relegation. The odds of them winning the Premier League were 5,000 to 1. For comparison, you had a better chance of correctly predicting several impossible events than seeing Leicester become champions. They didn't have the biggest stars. They didn't have the biggest budget. They didn't have the biggest stadium. What they had was belief. Week after week, they kept winning. People waited for the collapse. It never came. Eventually, the impossible became reality. Leicester City became Premier League champions. One of the greatest underdog stories in sports history. They reminded the football world of one simple truth: money buys talent. Belief creates legends. And speaking of legends, the next moment completed the greatest football story ever written. For almost 20 years, there was one question following Lionel Messi everywhere. Can he win the World Cup? He had won almost everything else: Champions League, league titles, Ballon d'Ors, countless records. But football's greatest prize always slipped away. He lost the 2014 World Cup final. He suffered heartbreaking defeats. Many believed the opportunity had passed forever. Then came Qatar. Every match carried enormous pressure. Every performance was analyzed by millions. Finally, after one of the greatest World Cup finals ever played, the final whistle arrived. Messi dropped to his knees. His teammates ran toward him. The entire stadium erupted. Then, he lifted the FIFA World Cup. One image, one trophy, one career finally completed. For millions of football fans, it wasn't just Argentina becoming champions. It felt like football itself had found the ending it had been waiting for. But if you think lifting the trophy was emotional, the next moment happened in less than a second. Yet it changed an entire World Cup. World Cup final. Spain, Netherlands, extra time. Everything balanced on one attack. Suddenly, Arjen Robben broke through. He was one-on-one. No defenders, no second chances. Around the world, millions were already expecting the goal. Robben shot. Iker Casillas reacted. His foot stretched out at the last possible moment. The ball stayed out. Everything changed. Minutes later, Spain scored. They became world champions for the first time in history. Had Casillas been one fraction of a second slower, football history might look completely different today. Sometimes, a World Cup isn't decided by a goal. Sometimes, it's decided by a save. And the top 3 moments on this list are even more unbelievable. Football waits decades for moments like this. For Spain, that moment arrived in Johannesburg. The score was still level. Every player on the pitch was exhausted. The World Cup final had become a battle of endurance. Then the ball fell perfectly inside the penalty area. Andres Iniesta didn't hesitate. One clean strike, the ball flew into the corner. For a split second, silence, then an entire nation exploded. Players sprinted across the pitch. Supporters cried. Commentators completely lost their voices. Spain had done it. After decades of heartbreak, they were finally world champions. One goal, one moment, one piece of football history that will live forever. But even that wasn't as dramatic as what happened next. Some football moments last forever. Because of one number. 93-20 Manchester City needed one goal. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Right now. Without it, the Premier League title was gone. The stadium was filled with disbelief. Time was disappearing. Then, Mario Balotelli somehow kept the ball alive. It rolled towards Sergio Agüero. One touch. One finish. The net exploded. The stadium erupted. Commentator Martin Tyler screamed one word that football fans will never forget. Agüero. Supporters collapsed to the ground. Players couldn't believe it. Even Manchester United players watching from another stadium stood frozen. In one kick, an entire season changed. One of the most dramatic league title finishes in football history. And yet, even that unbelievable ending isn't number one. Because nothing compares to what happened in Istanbul. If someone told you this score at halftime, you would never believe the ending. Champions League Final. Liverpool, AC Milan. One of the greatest teams football has ever seen. 45 minutes played. Liverpool, 3 goals behind. The match looked finished. Commentators were already praising Milan. Supporters sat in complete silence. Some Liverpool fans couldn't even watch anymore. Then, football reminded the world why we love this game. One goal. Hope, a second goal. Belief, a third goal. Complete disbelief. In just 6 unforgettable minutes, Liverpool erased a 3-goal deficit. The match went to penalties. Every kick carried unimaginable pressure. Then came the final save. Liverpool had done the impossible. Players collapsed onto the pitch. Supporters cried. Commentators called it the miracle of Istanbul. More than 20 years later, it remains the greatest comeback football has ever witnessed. Not because Liverpool were the better team, but because football refuses to follow the script. Sometimes the impossible wins. That's why football is different from every other sport. You can predict, you can analyze, you can calculate every statistic imaginable. And then one moment changes everything. One mistake, one goal, one save, one decision. These weren't just incredible football moments. They became part of football history. Moments replayed millions of times. Moments that inspired future generations. Moments that reminded us why billions of people around the world fell in love with this game. Because football isn't remembered for ordinary matches. It's remembered for extraordinary moments. And somewhere, in a stadium, we haven't even imagined yet, the next unforgettable football moment is already waiting to happen. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to the 26th Minute for more football documentaries, hidden stories, football history, World Cup analysis, and the greatest moments the game has ever produced. And now, I want to ask you one question. Which football moment shocked you the most? Was it the miracle of Istanbul, Brazil's 7-1 collapse, the hand of God, or something we didn't include? Tell us in the comments below. Because every football fan has one moment they'll never forget.